Support for today's show comes from Squarespace. Whether you need a portfolio to showcase your work, a store to sell your products and services, or a blog to share your ideas, Squarespace gives you everything you need to make your next move into a reality, including a free domain. I use Squarespace. It's very cool. They have all kinds of templates, plus also customizable features. You create a beautiful website, simple, intuitive. You simply add and arrange your content with the click of a mouse, and I can vouch for that. I'm constantly fiddling around with my website, going in the back end, seeing if I can make it look cooler, ways to let you guys know what's going on with me. It's a very cool, easy-to-use service. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com. Enter offer code CG to get 10% off your first purchase. That's like my name, Chris Gethard. Squarespace.com. Today's episode of Beautiful Anonymous brought to you by MailChimp. Trying to tell your story to the world, MailChimp, it can help for free. I am a MailChimp user of many years now. They got gorgeous pre-designed email templates. You can also code your own, show you how to send, when you should send, why people open an email, or click delete. They can help you find your people, grow your business. MailChimp can help you tell your story effectively and find people who care about it. And I'm telling you, I've used it way before this podcast ever existed. It's so simple, so easy, genuinely useful, everything it promises. Happy to tell you all about it. More at MailChimp.com. Hello to all my swappers out there. Listen to the end. I didn't make up that phrase. It's Beautiful Anonymous. 1 hour, one phone call, no names, no holds barred.
I'd rather go one-on-one. I think it'll be more fun, and I'll get to know you, and you'll get to know me.
Hey everybody, it's Gethard here. Welcome to another episode. Beautiful Anonymous. It's the most fun part of my week is getting to bring you guys these things that I see. It's like each episode, it's like a rock I throw into a pond and then see all the reactions. It's like the ripple. It's very cool for me. Thank you guys for supporting the show. If you want to support the show, I do want to mention we got Sorry Sally t-shirts, a catchphrase that has organically sprung from the show. Of course, every time I curse, I apologize to my mom, and callers have taken to the same habit. You go to earwolf.com, you can go to their store. Sorry Sally t-shirt, show your support for the show. Last week's episode, the cruise ship mafia, very fun episode. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you to that caller for calling. Feedback in the Facebook group. We got Beautiful Anonymous, the community on Facebook. We're now up to about 7,500 people as of the recording of this. It's really incredible how many of you guys are showing up and talking about the episodes, talking to each other, and it's become a real community. It's a cool thing to see. Thank you to all the mods who really keep an eye on that group. Very cool. Reaction of the last week's episode, very fun. A lot of people were like, this guy was really funny, laid back. A lot of people said this had the feel of an old school Beautiful Anonymous, like one of the early episodes where it kind of went in a bunch of different directions and nobody's sure where it was going to go. A lot of people saying nice change of pace to have somebody who's pretty laid back after a couple of emotional weeks. One person who did say, Chris, it's a little odd. You said this was a light episode and then a big chunk of it was dedicated to him playing in a band with a neo-Nazi who murdered his parents. That's a fair point. Not going to lie. I was focusing more on the cruise ship stuff and maybe forgot a little bit how much of it was about that. That's totally fair. Some people who said that one said, it was a little boring by my taste. And a guy named Paul actually said in the group, he said, I've never understood why some people say certain episodes are boring because I never seem to have a judgment on the quality of conversation. I just realized it's because as much as the stories themselves, I enjoy listening to people's accents and the way they speak. And I thought that was such a cool point of hearing that. That's really nice. That's nice to hear that even if the episodes aren't particularly content-wise, that you still get that out of it. That's one of the things that's most exciting to me is I feel like hopefully someday people will listen back to these episodes and go, oh, that's what people sounded like in 2016, 2017. That's the things people cared about, what was on their minds. And I have a feeling that some of the episodes that are less controversial and more boring might actually be a little bit more of like the time capsules that tell you what people were actually like back in these days. And then I did someone named Trip left a message that made me laugh a lot. Put this on the Facebook group. I've been changing up play speeds for podcasts to cram them in during my commute. Accidentally put BA on at half speed today. Geth's voice sounded like an episode of Drunk History. I know he's sober, but I found it hilarious. Had to let it ride out for a few minutes. I needed that laugh today. So apparently if you're looking for a laugh, you play the episode on half speed. I sound very drunk and funny. So there's that. This week's episode, very, very excited to bring it to you. We got to the voicemail. This is one of the voicemail calls. We do, of course, have the voicemail line. If people feel like there's a story they really have that needs to be heard on the show and it's not getting out there, 802-392-3288. You leave us a voicemail. Let us know what it's about. The producers listen to it. I don't listen to it, so you remain anonymous. And then we get some stories out there. We have a call from a member of the trans community, and I think a lot of us have, in the past couple of years, a lot of people have been hearing more about the trans community, reading more about them. There's, of course, things like in North Carolina, big debate over gendered bathrooms, some bills that people say are very discriminatory. I agree. I think they are. And it's a community that I think historically, it's fair to say, it was maybe a little bit less vocal, and it's a very inspiring, cool thing to see. It's a community that is becoming more vocal and that more and more people are rallying around. And I think that's beautiful, and happy to hear someone's experience in their own words. I think one of the really incredible things about this call to me is it's a little bit boring. It's a little bit more of the more boring ones. And I actually think that's really beautiful in the sense of it really underlines the fact that a trans person is just a person like any other person. There's nothing particularly controversial about this episode. It's just someone telling us about their life experience, and their life experience happens to be pretty specific. And it's not shocking because people are just people. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I had from this episode. I know I live in New York City, which is an incredibly diverse place where everyone's on top of each other. And I do think there's maybe some people out there listening who have never had the pleasure, the opportunity to actually sit and talk with a member of the trans community. And I have been lucky enough to do that. And hopefully this episode, you hear someone in their own words and again, just a person being a person and being a person that feels true to themselves. I think that's very cool. I want to put out there up front, I say a couple things in this episode as I get caught up in conversation and sorting things out that I am well aware are ignorant. I putzed a few moments. I know that. So as you listen, please understand that I am very much a supporter and an ally, and I'm learning just like everybody else. And there's a few things that when I listened back and heard myself say them, I cringed a little bit. There's one point where some medications come up and my reactions to them, I'm like, oh God, why did I say that? But that being said, it's all in the name of learning, and I hope that that's okay and not too controversial, because that's the best we can all do. I think the best we can do is just listen. I think one of the main things with this show, I want to listen more than I talk. I want to learn, and I got a chance to learn, and you can hear me sorting some things out and learning on the spot in this episode. So really such a pleasure. Thank you to the caller for being bold and brave and telling us about your life in your own words. And listeners, I think you'll find this one very interesting. Hope you enjoy it. Hello?
Hi.
Hi. How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm okay.
Yeah, we had a little bit of trouble connecting, but I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah, thanks for leaving a voicemail.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I've been listening since pretty close to the beginning of the show, and I was just thinking that there isn't any real representation of trans people yet, and I thought it would be great to kind of give you the opportunity to ask some questions, or just hear about like the trans experience and have that as part of the show, since I know it's like a big newsworthy thing at the moment, and I know you're trying to diversify a little bit on the show.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. Like we managed to, I think, the first 15, 20 episodes of the show, we hadn't aired any yet. So it's just people who knew me prior. Those were mostly, comedy fans. So I feel like we've expanded it, but it's nice. And I think you are right. Like, I think I am making a goal to try to tell as many different types of stories as I can. And this is what I'm happy to tell. And
I think that's great.
Yeah, and it's nice you're ready to share yours. And I just want to say right up front that I am almost certain I'll say something ignorant unintentionally at some point during this call. But and I apologize ahead of time, and feel free to just make fun of me when that inevitably happens, because I do that often. And I also know I am a New York resident, and I have many friends who identify all sorts of ways when it comes to gender. And I know one of the great compliments. I have a friend who's a musician who is very fluid, and said to me, like I once hosted a show that they played, and afterwards they said to me, I one of the things I appreciate about you is you at least always try. You at least always try to get the pronouns right, and that's more than a lot to you. And that actually meant a lot to me. But I promise I will try, and I apologize ahead of time for any offense.
No, that's fine. Trying counts for a lot because not everybody does. And I will absolutely tell you if you're being offensive.
Yeah. It also seems like it's a thing where kind of everybody's, like, as a culture, we're all figuring out together, and what's offensive to some people isn't to others, and vice versa. And that's part of what I think is so fascinating about this time in history. But my opinions.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I mean, I can only speak to my experience, and I can guess at what I think other trans people will find offensive based on, being in that community. But you're absolutely right that I can really only speak to my own experience.
Yes. It sounds like we're on the same page. Sounds like we're looking out for each other on this one. So as far as your experience goes, where should we begin? Like, how do you tell your own story? How does that start for you?
So I'm a trans man, which means that I am what you would say usually the term that people like now is female assigned at birth. So when I was born, the doctors decided that I was female based on their reading of my genitals, essentially. But I don't identify as female at all. I've been socially and medically transitioning for close to 4 years now, and I, in my daily life, I live 100% as male, and that's, worlds better and truer for me than it was before.
And how old were you when you started to realize when this realization, when this journey, however you want to phrase it, how old were you when this began for you?
Well, I mean, I started medically and socially transitioning when I was, how old am I now? When I was 24, I guess. But I was aware that I was transgender much earlier than that. It just took me a very long time to kind of come to the place where I could actually begin transitioning. So I identified actively as, transgender, giving it that name, starting in, I guess, 9th grade, the first year of high school. And I was out as trans, to the GSA, not really to my family or to everybody else, but I had a community in high school where I could be myself a little bit. But even before that, I was a tomboy, I guess. Even in the pictures of me as a very young child, I am a boy, but I look like a boy, even in my very young pictures. And trans people generally talk about gender dysphoria, which is the feeling of not being the sex or the gender that other people think you are, and it can manifest in completely different ways for different trans people. Like, for some people, it's very body associated, so that they experience a feeling of disconnection or disgust with their body parts. For some people, it's more socially, where they feel very oppressed or very negative about being treated as the wrong gender by other people. For most trans people, it's a mixture of those two things. So even very, very, very young, before I knew the word transgender, I already knew that I hated wearing dresses. I hated dolls. I hated being associated with female coded things in general. I knew all of that felt completely wrong to me. So, that's not the experience of every trans person. Not every person has a narrative like mine where they did know earlier. But I knew before I could name it, I knew that I wasn't a girl.
So even before the word transgender was in your vocabulary, you knew I'm not. You would actively think I am not a girl. I know this is not correct. This is not. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. Did you think I am actually a boy, or did you exist in some middle ground that I imagine could be extremely confusing? How does it manifest itself in that sense?
I mean, I started saying like I should have been a boy in like late middle school, early high school. So before that, it was just like, this is wrong, this is not me, but not really knowing that there was an alternative. Because like before I knew about trans people at all, I didn't know that it was an option to transition, or an option, like it was even possible for me to be something else. I just knew that I wasn't a girl, or that I felt incredibly wrong being treated as a girl, and having the experience of being treated as a female person in like my daily life, even to the extent that, that it affects, or that comes into play with young people.
Yeah.
But I mean, even like before babies are born, we have everything's coded a certain color. From the moment of conception, really, like our entire, like so much of what people expect us to be is determined by what they think that your gender is.
Right.
So even very young children, if that is wrong, or if that feels wrong, the gender that you're coded as by other people, it has a tremendous negative impact on your life, or it did for me.
Right. So you come out into this world, which you didn't ask. Nobody asks to be a part of this, and you're born into a world where everything's pink and everything's soft, and all the toys look a certain way. And as you're extremely young, gaining a sense of your own consciousness, instantly, you're like, wait, hold on. But someone who's that young isn't taught to verbalize that or express that, or to even know how to properly feel that. It's rough.
Yeah.
It must feel truly horrible. So that's incredible background information, and I bet a lot of people listening to it, because I should say, like I mentioned, my friend Mal, who's a musician who identifies in a non-binary way. I have another good friend who's actually helped me with a lot of my work over the years, who transitioned. So I feel like I have some. I'm an artist in New York City, and I have friends who have experienced this, and I still, as you can hear me hem and haw, I still feel ignorant. So maybe if it's okay with you, maybe a good place to start is we can do like whatever you're comfortable with. There's I'll just put this on the table. There's like an FAQ of questions that are probably ignorant, and they come up all the time. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Maybe you could just answer the ones from that list that you know, and that I am vaguely aware of, that you're willing to just get out of the way of, like, here's stuff that comes up. Here's the answers in my experience. That way, and I know there's certain things that are kind of a faux pas to ask. Maybe we could start with the ones where you're like, people ask these all the time, and I'm comfortable answering them. And then maybe we'll move on to like, and here's the stuff that gets asked all the time that you should know isn't the coolest thing in the world to ask. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you might have to help me come up with questions.
Yeah.
But I will try. And like one of the things that's, I think, a big problem is that people, even people who are not, in any way transphobic, most people don't know a lot about the experience of being trans or the trans community, so they tend to be very curious. And this is fine, except that often trans people end up being put in a position where it's sort of their responsibility to go around and educate everybody and answer all their questions sometimes very invasive questions when they just want to live their life and go to work and be a normal person, which they are.
Of course.
So I'm putting myself out there, and I'm saying like I would like to share this information, and I would like to help educate, and I would like to put my voice and my experience out there. So it's totally fine for you to be asking me these questions, and I'm not going to get offended. And I'll definitely tell you like that's not a question you should ask other people probably, but in this situation, it's fine.
I'd like it.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I like that the first thing we're putting on the record is like, you're calling this show where it's a public thing and you're willing to speak for your experience. But maybe the first thing that we should put on this FAQ is every time you meet a trans person, it doesn't mean you get to stop there a day and just checks to ask them every fucking question that ever popped into your head. That's maybe the first thing. Maybe the first thing we want to put on record, because I think one of the important things on my end with that is that there's a being curious about something and wanting to learn about something is a positive. Turning a human into an object of curiosity is when it maybe crosses a line where it gets old fast. I can imagine.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
especially when what people are asking you about is like, what do your genitals look like?
Yeah, it's something that's like as personal as it can get, and is also something that one thing I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about more as you and I get to know each other in this hour is also a community where it's still very much at times dangerous to be a part of it. Where and between one of the things I'm very well aware of, because I speak a lot about mental health, is it's a pretty well-known thing at this point that the trans community highest attempted suicide rates out of any demographic in American culture, at least. There's also, there's homophobia in this world, and transphobia, I think, is even more targeted and even more specific, I think, because it is a little bit more of a community that's maybe come more mainstream more recently, I think it's probably fair to say. We'll get into all that. But I do like that the first one you did mention was people asking you about your genitals. That's got to get real old real fast. That being said, on behalf of everybody who is wondering, I wonder what your let's go through the FAQ. I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, especially since, I know people are curious, but especially since that's not a question that you ask people, Yeah. It's not a question, when you're meeting somebody for the first time, whether it's in a social setting or you're interviewing them for a job or you just, say hi to them on the street, you never say, nice to meet you, what kind of genitals do you have, or how big is it? How big is it? Is it really stretched out? These aren't questions that you need to know about. That you need to ask anybody who you're not going to be actively about to have sex with them.
Right.
If you're and it's a different situation if you're meeting somebody with the potential of a sexual relationship.
Right.
But except under those circumstances, there's no reason you ever need to know what somebody has in their pants. There's really just not. And the fact that so cis means not trans. So a cis person is not a trans person. So there's no reason that a cis person needs to ask a trans person whether they've had the surgery or they plan to have the surgery. It's completely invasive and not relevant to anything. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. And for anybody who's not, because I feel like cis is a label that's come into usage recently, and it's actually fun. On the Facebook group for this for Beautiful Anonymous, there was an incident last week. I shouldn't say incident; it makes me sound like a school teacher. But somebody had asked somebody from England basically said, "I've seen people saying they're cisgendered, and we don't really. It's not in use in England." And then some people in Australia were like, "Yeah, we don't say that here either. What does it mean?" And there was a very touchy discussion explaining it. My perception is that on the very basic level, being cisgendered means you're born, and I'll just be crass because I'm an idiot and a comedian. Like in my case, I was born, doctors looked at it. They said, all right, he's got balls and he got a peen. That's a boy, and I've chosen to stick with that identification. I am cisgendered. That's the basic description, if I'm correct.
Yeah, essentially. It means you identify as the gender which you were assigned at birth.
Yeah, you said it very eloquently and left out the phrase balls and peen. Well done.
It is it's from Latin, so it's a term that's come into usage relatively recently, but it is a very old word. I'm a classicist also, so sorry. But trans is related to like, transportation, like transcontinental. It means across, right? Cis means on this side. So like if you were talking about a river, cis, it's a preposition. So trans would be the opposite side. Cis would be the side you're on.
Right. So the metaphor would be that if you're born gender-wise on the banks of a river, cisgender people stay dry, trans people swim across that river, wind up on the other side at some point. And in some sense. That's cool.
Yes, exactly.
So first things first, let's not ask people about their genitals. It's weird. I once got heckled. I was once doing stand-up, and I was heckled. This was in New York City at some hipster bar in the East Village, and a lady started heckling me, and she was about 55 years old from the Midwest. Her children were with her in the audience. And she was very drunk and heckling me, asking me about my genital size. And it was extremely uncomfortable, And that was just a drunk lady. And I can't imagine that feels good to have people ask you that literally all the time.
No, it's horrible.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like my fiance is a trans woman. So she goes through this a lot more than I do because people use, this is really kind of offensive and not the right way to talk about it, but people say like some trans people pass and some don't.
Right.
Not the best term to use because it's essentially saying like if I say I pass as male, that's saying I'm not really male, and it's like I'm pretending to be male and like tricking everybody.
Right.
Which is not the case. I am actually male. But my trans woman, my fiance is more visibly trans than I do. So, like, in my daily life at this point, nobody misgenders me. People don't, like, at least, as far as I know, people don't automatically identify me as trans. My girlfriend experiences that more than I do, that people can tell that she's a trans woman. So she gets this a lot more than I do. But, like, she lives in... or she doesn't live there anymore, but she comes from like a very tight-knit Italian community. And when she goes to visit that neighborhood, since everybody there has known her since she was very young, they really feel entitled to ask her those sorts of questions. So she like has gotten from the like 85-year-old Italian grandmother who's known her since she was born. Like, are you going to cut it off?
Oh, wow. So she goes back to like an old school Italian neighborhood, like a stereotypical ethnic neighborhood, like 50 style, where there's like traditional Italian businesses, and she goes into like the Italian deli, and she's just trying to order some gabagool, and they're like, "Hey, let's talk about this." She got to put up with that.
Yes.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Exactly.
Look at that! I'm dropping the word gabagool. For anybody who didn't grow up in northern New Jersey, you may know that ham as capicola. We inexplicably call it gabagool. Now that you've learned that, we're going to learn some other stuff. We're going to learn about the products and services that our many fine sponsors have to offer. Enjoy these ads. We'll be back with more phone call in just a moment. Everybody needs to take a little bit better care of themselves, right? And taking care of your mental health. It's no exception. People, physical health, no stigmas, mental health. Let's drop those stigmas, all right? Take care of it. That's why today's sponsor, Talkspace, the online therapy company, makes it easy to connect with an experienced, licensed therapist handpicked just for you for as little as $32 a week. Using Talkspace, you can send your therapist texts, audio and video messages anytime you want. You even do a live video chat. If you want to vent about work or family, talk through something that's been on your mind, no problem. Your therapist is ready to help. It's my favorite thing about therapy is all the things that are rushing through my head. I got somebody who can just unload them on, get it off my chest. It really helps. Sign up, learn more, go to Talkspace.com/beautiful And as a special offer for our listeners, use the coupon code BEAUTIFUL. You get $30 off your first month, and you show your support for Beautiful Anonymous. That's code BEAUTIFUL, Talkspace.com/beautiful. Talkspace is therapy for how we live today. Support for today's show comes from Squarespace. Whatever your next big idea might be, count on Squarespace to help you create an eye-catching online platform that brings it to life. Whether you need a portfolio to showcase your work, a store to sell your products and services, or a blog to share your ideas, Squarespace gives you everything you need to look like an expert right from the start. You even get a unique domain. Strengthens your brand right there. Makes it easier for visitors to find you. Plus, with Squarespace's award-winning templates, creating a beautiful website, simple, intuitive, quite an easy process. I do it. You just arrange stuff, add stuff, click of a mouse. I figure it out right on the spot. It's not like I'm sitting there reading up, how do I do this? How do I move it all around? No, it's very intuitive. It's simple. You don't have to install or patch or upgrade anything ever, though. If you do have a question, which I often do myself, Squarespace's award-winning 24/7 customer support can help you with any problem, no matter how technical, trivial seeming. I've asked them many questions, and they don't treat any question like a dumb question. You think of them, it's like your very own IT department. So make your next move. Start your free trial at squarespace.com today. Enter offer code CG. You get 10% off your first purchase, plus a free domain. That's CG, like my name, Chris Gethard. CG, squarespace.com. Enjoy it. Thank you, Squarespace. Thank you so much to everybody who sponsors this show, makes it happen. Please do support those companies, use those promo codes. And now, let's get back to the phone call. She goes into the Italian deli, and she's just trying to order some gabagool. And they're like, hey, let's talk about this. She got to put up with that.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yes,
Oh, boy.
Exactly.
Nah.
I have much more moved away from where I grew up and don't see a lot of people who knew me in my prior incarnation. So all the more power to her that she is able to stay connected to that. I just opted to sort of step away from all of it so as not to have to deal with it.
Yeah. I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the problematic things about asking people about the what's happening with their genitals is I also get the sense that it's a different choice for different people. Is the sense
Absolutely.
I get. Some people have surgeries. Some people like to not have the surgery. Some people, I know one friend of mine who I believe it was called a packer, which was just something to fill out the shape of the gender they prescribe to. I feel like there's a whole range of options. So let it lie. Let it lie. Let's not ask, because the answer is probably not as simple as you think it's going to be anyway, and it's just going to get uncomfortable for everybody.
Absolutely, it's a super personal choice, and I think because cis people tend to really have trouble separating someone's sex and somebody's gender, they really associate the genitals as the main and maybe sole indicator of what gender somebody is. So if they're somebody so I guess maybe it's hard for cis people to understand why a trans person might choose not to get quote unquote the surgery. And there are tons of different surgeries also. So saying the surgery is ridiculous, on the face of it. But I think it might be difficult to understand why someone might elect not to. But it's a completely individual choice. And, obviously somebody doesn't have to have genital surgery to make them the gender that they actually are. Personally, I haven't had any gender-related surgeries yet. I definitely intend to get top surgery, which is male chest reconstruction, at some point in my life. But it doesn't, not having had those surgeries yet doesn't impede me in my daily life and doesn't make me less male, if that makes sense.
It does. I will say this. I bet to a lot of people who have maybe never been around any sort of alternative community, if that's okay for you to use, I bet it doesn't, as you're saying. But you know what I think is one very important thing to point out towards the early part of this conversation is one thing that I really, really, really wish people would just accept, way more than they do, is your ability to understand someone else's experience really has nothing to do with that experience, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
there are a lot of people who think about their genitals and go, that's what makes me what I am. I'm listening to a person say that's not what makes me what I am. I don't get it. People's ability to get it really is a moot point. It doesn't matter, especially in communities that, need support and protection. I don't need to get it. I don't need to understand. I've never had the urge to alter my genitalia. I do understand that for people who do have that urge and who do follow through with that, that is an incredibly bold choice and brave choice, and a choice that is not easy to make, both physically and societally. It's a harder and scarier life than the one I have to lead in this particular area because of that. So my ability to understand it has nothing to do with my duty to respect it. And I think that's one of the big forgotten things in many areas of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my impulse is, I guess, to foster understanding or to try to help people understand, because I feel like when you understand something, it's easier to accept it. And God knows the trans people needs acceptance, and it needs, cis allies. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, that shouldn't be necessary. You shouldn't need to understand something to accept it, or to accept that other people get to live the way that they want, and that it has nothing to do with you, and you shouldn't try to, stop them from using the bathroom that they want to use.
Oh, it gets me so mad. It gets me so mad for so many reasons. And I'm sure you have many more opinions than I do, I'm sure, because you have to deal with it. What's sexy about a public restroom?
Nothing.
In what world is this like a place where there's going to be any sort of anybody who's a sexual predator who would go into a restroom to sexually be that predator? I don't know what anybody who's going to do that is going to do that no matter who they are. It has nothing to do. There's nothing about
exactly. If someone is a sexual predator, they're not going to look at the sign on the door and be like, "Oh, it's for women only. Guess I can't go rape someone."
Yeah,
it's completely ridiculous.
And you hear about stories of people being taken advantage of all the time. And and I know for a fact people, any kid who's in a bathroom is in danger of an adult being a sexual predator if the person is built and has something wrong where they are a sexual predator. If that's their instinct, it has nothing that happens. Men do that, women do that, people, anybody can do that. That's a fucked up person, and there's no class of people that's more prone to being sexually aggressive in public restrooms. They're gross places. People want to go in there. They want to pee. They never want to poo. And they want to leave. That's what happens in public restrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking with my girlfriend, or my fiance now, about what I should talk about when I was on this call with you. And one of the things she said, we were talking about the bathroom issue since it's been in the news so much, and I figured it would probably come up. And what she said is it's not about bathrooms, just like during Jim Crow, it wasn't about water fountains.
Yes.
No one was actually no one actually on the decision-making side was talking about diseases being passed between white people and black people. It was just about discrimination. It was just about segregation. It was just about dehumanizing a group of people. It's the same thing.
100%. Which is why it's particularly distressing, too, that our president used the phrase, this actually should be a states' rights issue, because it also in civil rights was a states' rights issue, and I don't think anybody's particularly proud of how that went. And I bet there's some people who are, and those are people who should be ashamed. But the phrase "states' rights" applied to any civil rights. I feel like everybody's brain should just be going like, like what's going on, red flag. It's really distressing, especially because here's the thing too. Anybody, how can I phrase this? Anybody listening right now, I bet there are people out there who are religious, who define their morals through that sense, and maybe they do have strong opinions. But here's where I draw a line: is whatever your moral reservations are about anyone else's lifestyle, when you've got a segment of society where people are killing themselves at a distressingly higher rate than any other segment of society, and the government steps in and says, actually, we're going to go ahead and peel back things that have aimed to protect this community. It's so callous and intentional feeling to me. And I feel like the starting point of the conversation should be, there's something going on where people are self-harming and ending their own lives at a distressingly high rate. Let's figure out how to step in and stop that first, just out of the basic respect for human life. And to say we're going to roll back protections actually sends the opposite message of we don't give a shit, and it's horrible.
Absolutely. But I mean, I think the issue there is that people see those statistics about like the suicide rate or the suicide attempt rate among trans people, and they just read that as, oh, trans people are insane. Right. And rather than thinking like there's something going wrong here, we need to address it. Just hormone replacement therapy, being able to take the hormones that your body should be naturally producing. Like for me, being able to take testosterone, and for my fiance to be able to take estrogen, and to have like the chemical changes that those gives you, for many, many trans people, they alleviate depression, they alleviate anxiety. For me in particular, I had horrible anxiety and depression before I started taking hormones, which are almost completely gone now. That's not the experience of every trans person by any means, but almost across the board, taking hormones, going through hormone replacement therapy helps trans people more than anything else. Right. And so the fact that there's, gatekeeping, that there are still doctors and communities who want to keep trans people from having access to hormone replacement therapy, that like even sidestepping the issue of poverty, that trans people have a ton of trouble often finding work, finding living spaces, even sidestepping that. The fact that it's so difficult for trans people to be able just to start the transition process often is horrible, because very often they get labeled as mentally ill versus that this is like, not all trans people would agree with me in classifying it this way, but like I tend to feel like I have like essentially a birth defect, that like I was born with a brain and a body that don't match each other. So, and because I can't change my brain, because we know very well that neither talk therapy or, like antipsychotic drugs or even electroshock therapy, none of those things quote unquote fix a trans person's brain or make them the gender that people think they're supposed to be. The only recourse is to change the body, and luckily I can do that.
It's really fascinating to me as you say that. It makes a total sense to answer the question coming out of your mouth. But you know what? One thing that is really eye-opening, and I've never heard it phrased this way, and I've never thought about it this way. You're basically saying for you, testosterone was medicine. It was medicine.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
That you grew up feeling like there was some sort of, I don't know if we could say like disorder might be a word that some people might readily be able to understand, and that the medicine that helped you correct that disorder happened to be testosterone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, I wouldn't, I guess I'm
disorder, bad word. Disorder, bad word. Well, first foot in my mouth moment, Gethard. Big time.
Well, no, I mean, I'm trying to tweak it a little bit, I guess, because I don't think it's like that. I don't want that to sound like I actually am female, right? And that I just needed to take testosterone in order to like cure my mental disorder of like right
anxiety
and depression.
No, there's many more layers than Yes. I did not mean to imply that. I apologize.
No, not at all. I'm just trying to work through it at the same time along with you. But yeah, like for me, that was the big turning point, because puberty is a terrible time for most people, but it's especially horrible.
Especially when it happens when you're like 17. Sorry, I made it about myself. Oh God, my voice didn't change until I was like beginning a senior year in high school, and woe is me.
But like,
woe is me. Anyway, you were saying.
No, but even that's kind of illustrative of what I mean, because like the reason it was you were troubled that it took so long for you to go through puberty.
Right.
Like a trans person, a trans woman. If you'd been a trans woman and your voice hadn't dropped until 17, you would have been like thanking God.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Because when a cis person goes through puberty, their body, even if it's scary, like you don't know why you're suddenly getting hair, you're suddenly bleeding, whatever, you're getting erections, whatever it is. Even if it's scary, it's stuff that you feel like is supposed to be happening to you. Right. You know? Or right. I guess that's my assumption anyway, as a trans person. My assumption is that for cis people, like, you're good with the changes because it's like you becoming like the adult you're supposed to be. It's your body changing in ways that feel correct to you. Yes. For a trans person, you feel like your body is absolutely betraying you, or like when I started developing a chest, and like people started saying like, oh, you have to wear a bra now. It was horrible. Yeah. I felt it's like I felt like I was growing giant tumors, and everyone thought it was normal, and nobody would do anything about it. Yeah. And like I know for my fiance, like growing facial hair was incredibly traumatic for her. Right. And she has had like full body laser hair removal because just like she felt like a monster. She felt like there was like mold growing all over her body because it felt wrong to her to have those changes. Yeah, and that's kind of like that's why I think for a lot of trans people, puberty is really kind of where everything falls apart for them, because when you're a kid, everybody's body is a little bit more androgynous, and for a lot of trans people, it's easier to deal with. But yeah, so puberty kind of like brings everything to the surface and throws it right in your face. It's like puberty is horrible for literally everyone. And I can't imagine, it's like there's just no world in which I can imagine the experience of all the horror that I experienced, plus the end result that I'm getting to every step of the way being something that I just vehemently don't feel is right. That's exactly horrible. I mean, this is a gross story. Can I tell you a gross story? Always. Can you tell me a story? You can always tell me a story. And then when you ask, it's a very convenient way for us to build a cliffhanger. So thank you for that. We got some ads coming up. Please do support these products, get these services. These are the guys who help me bring this podcast to you. And I really believe in all the things that they're selling you. So check it out. Check out the promo codes. I use so many sponsors myself and enjoy it. We'll be back with more phone call in just a second. For so long, socks have been manufactured as an afterthought. Little attention to detail until 4 years ago, two guys set out to rethink things. And after spending 2 years fixing things they didn't like about conventional socks and inventing innovative new features, all in the pursuit of extreme comfort, Bombas was born. And I'm telling you guys, my wife wears Bombas socks. She has for a long time before they were ever thinking about advertising on the show. I told her Bombas was getting involved in Beautiful Anonymous. She flipped out. She says they're the ultimate socks. She was really losing it. She loves these things. Bombas offers premium socks equipped with 7 substantial improvements to the ordinary sock, including a reinforced footbed built for extreme comfort, a Y-stitched heel that cups the back of your foot. Bombas socks are such game changers, customers overwhelmingly claim they're the most comfortable socks they've ever worn, and I've worn them. I agree. My wife absolutely agrees. And very cool thing, every pair of socks Bombas sells, they also donate a pair to those in need. Socks are the most requested items at homeless shelters. It's a very cool thing to do. They've donated over 2 million pairs. If you need new socks, you can't go wrong with Bombas.
So go to bombas.com/stories to get 20% off your first order. That's BOMBAS. You're going to love your socks, or you get your money back guaranteed. That's bombas.com/stories. Thank you again to everybody who buys ad space on this podcast. It is very much appreciated. And now let's finish off this phone call with our new friend.
I mean, this is a gross story. Can I tell you a gross story?
Always.
Okay. So when I first got my period, I was so embarrassed about it and so horrified and so humiliated because I felt like I knew what it was. I'd read this is what is going to happen during puberty books, but because it felt so wrong to me and I felt like I was doing something deeply bad, that I, instead of throwing away the pads, I just put them in a grocery plastic bag and hid them under my mattress for months and months until my dad, because I didn't want, because I have a little sister, and I was always my dad always took me to do sort of the boys' things. Because I was much more masculine than my little sister. And I was always so proud of that because it felt so good that I felt like my dad was treating me like his son in a lot of ways, that I desperately did not want him to find out that I'd gotten my period and that I wasn't really a boy. Not that I thought he actually thought I was, but quote unquote wasn't really a boy. So I had this, so I didn't want to throw them away in the garbage can, so I hid them, until he found them one day.
And that does beg the question. It kind of transitions nicely. No, as I heard myself say that, I was I was not trying. Okay, I'm not trying to. No world was that a joke. It's just the. Oh God, it's it is a minefield trying not to offend people on this show. Every caller is someone from a different walk of life. Where I'm okay, so as a white guy married to a white lady, let me ask you a million questions about this thing you're calling about stranger while married. It's a minefield, the show. But when you didn't want your dad to find out, you had these feelings of resistance. What was when you did tell everybody what was going on? How was it received?
When I actually came out and said I'm trans?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, for me, pretty much totally fine. And that definitely isn't the experience of every trans person. But the first person in my family I told was my little sister, and she went to an extremely liberal college. So I knew that she had trans friends. So she was immediately super supportive of me, and actually told me that she had been kind of wondering if I was going to come out to her as trans, since I think once she learned about other people who were trans men, she kind of saw that in me. And then my dad just doesn't care at all.
That's rad.
Because I'm also on the East Coast, and all of my family is very, very liberal. My mom kind of took it as an opportunity to say oh well, she was kind of this proves to me that it was not my fault that you were a difficult child. So I'm absolved of all the fights we've ever had or all the mean things I've ever said to you, and we can start anew.
Wow.
Which was, on one hand, really frustrating because I'm still really mad at her for a lot of the things she does, and I don't want her to feel totally absolved. But on the other hand, is nice that she, wasn't mad at me or didn't say that I was wrong about my own identity. So, I'm very, very lucky in that my whole family has been very accepting and has, everyone slips up a couple times in the beginning, but at this point, everybody uses my real name. Everybody uses the correct gender pronouns for me and everything. So yeah, I've been very lucky in that regard.
And do you have any advice on that for as far as gendered language? Do you have any advice for me and everybody else out there who just wants to be a good person and supportive? How do I know when to use, what's the general guideline on using they and them versus he and she? you have any just like general, here's, because it does feel like we've all kind of spent the last 5 to 10 years kind of figuring this out together. Because I have one friend who it just doesn't, it just says, I don't want to identify as a binary and in a binary way. And I feel so bad because we both really like comic books. And every time I will say they and them very respectfully, but when I get excited about comic books, I'll be like, dude, I went back, I reread Frank, and I just say, dude, and I always feel bad.
Well, I mean, are they bothered by you using dude with them?
I don't know, but I'm Irish Catholic, and I feel guilty about anything that I possibly can.
I mean, I think dude is pretty non-gendered at this point. I mean, like, I don't speak for all trans people again, but like my fiance isn't bothered by people using like dude with her because it's just something people say. It's not really like, I don't feel like it's super male coded. But in terms of like using the right pronouns, it really should just be like what that person wants.
Yeah.
And so if it sounds like your friend uses they pronouns, use they pronouns. If somebody tells you they want female or male pronouns, use those. It can be hard since I think the way that we read somebody's gender is really like hardwired, and it's kind of like an instantaneous process that to the point that like we don't really think about it. We don't think about like when we're walking down the street, we don't say, okay, male, female, blah, blah, blah. Like you don't really go through that process. It just like clicks in your head. So it's hard to switch over with somebody, especially if you don't feel like they look like the gender they're telling you are, especially if they, are early in their transition or if you've known them for a long time. But that's really just like the most important and most respectful thing you can do for them. If they tell you they want different pronouns than you've been using for them, or a different name, just change. If you mess up a couple times, apologize quickly and move on and try not to do it again. It's just making that effort is the most important thing. And if there's somebody who you don't know what pronouns they prefer, just politely ask them.
Yeah.
It's especially somebody who presents in an androgynous or in a non-binary way. Like they know that people are going to be confused about it. Asking is way better. Politely asking is way better than making assumptions one way or the other. Because,
right.
Even when people know that it's not like intentionally hurtful, it's very distressing to be misgendered because that means that you're not being like experienced socially by other people the way you feel like you should be.
Right. And I don't want to, because this has been very informative and really eye-opening, and I hope it's been an okay conversation for you too. I also hear, and I feel like you probably dealt with bumbling dudes with good intentions many times, so I'm sure this is familiar to you. But like, are there any stories? Because I want to, like, have you run into any bullshit that the world should know about? You know what I mean? Of like, here's the type of thing I have to put up with. Where this is not just theoretical, and you're not here. You're not trying to like just use this podcast to, and maybe you are. If you're like, actually, that is my priority, that's fine. But it feels like it shouldn't just be like, it's not just, let me walk you through the steps of this. Like, this is real life shit. And is there any real life shit you can put out there to just make it eye opening of like, yeah, this shit is real, Sorry, Sally, by the way. I just said shit 19 times. I have to apologize to my mom for that.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Sally.
Yeah, big time.
I mean, I guess I don't want to, like, speak for other people too much or share other people's experiences, but, like, realistically, I've had it really easy. Like I said, my family is very liberal. I live in a large city on the West Coast not the West Coast, the East Coast, that has, a lot of resources for trans people. So I haven't, like, experienced, like, significant trans-related adversity in my life. my, my fiance has come into contact with a lot more of that than myself. So I guess I can talk about her a little bit, but, I think, I think the biggest thing, or not the biggest thing, because obviously the biggest thing is like, maybe stop murdering trans people. Maybe, stop labeling them as sexual predators or people who are mentally ill, or godless heathens who should burn in hellfire. But trans people are just people like everybody else. We just want to have normal lives. I just want to get up and walk my dogs and do my job and go home and have dinner, just like everybody else. And it really doesn't make sense that people feel like they need to legislate the way that other people behave or live their lives. And it doesn't make sense that institutionally trans people don't have, in many states, in many places, don't have legal protections to make sure that they can get employment and have housing and have proper medical care. My fiance, she's been out at work for over a year now, and she's still every day is misgendered by coworkers, and at some point, you have to give people time to make mistakes and to learn, I guess, and to get used to your new identity, or knowing you as the person you actually are versus who they thought you were or expected you to be. But other people have to, if you know somebody who's come out as trans, you have to respect their identity and make an effort, because it's not about you and it doesn't affect you at all.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's the thing I want to jump on too. When you just said it doesn't affect you at all. Here's the thing that drives me nuts is the people who seem to vocally have a problem with other people's lifestyles. It's not like they're coming into contact with that. It's not someone who has a moral misgiving who thinks you're going to burn in hell for being trans. It's not. I'm certain that person's not seeking out the trans community, and I'm certain trans people aren't flocking to hang out with them. So if that's what I don't get is if the only way, if somebody's this, I have a real problem with this. I'm assuming the only way that it's affecting your day-to-day life is because you just can't seem to just shut the fuck up about it. You know what I mean? Sorry, Sally, but it's you know what I mean? If someone thinks you're going to burn in hell, then it seems why can't you just live your life, let other people live their lives? And if their hunch is correct, then we'll just be comfortable now, and we'll deal with burning in some eternal brimstone later on. And great, but that's the thing. It's if it seems to me so many of the people who have an issue with this, the only reason it's affecting their lives is because they have such a fucking issue with it. So maybe just drop it and let people live.
I mean, absolutely. My fiance works in a school, and she has parents, even though they've known her, she's worked there for years. They've known her for years, but now that she's presenting female at work, they'll pull their children away from her, she's going to do something to them, or they'll a parent told her it was inappropriate for her to be wearing a spaghetti strapped shirt and to have the straps showing, and she's frequently harassed on the subway or on the street. Just especially for trans women, there's a ton of negative public attention. Even stopping short from people actually being assaulted or murdered. So absolutely, just calm down. Don't pay so much attention to other people because they're not paying that much attention to you, and let them live their lives. And also, trans people are not going to attack your children. We definitely don't want to do that.
Yeah. There's no, your fiance is teaching children because at some point your fiance decided, I want to help educate kids. That's a good thing. That's a good giving thing that didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean,
Yeah,
drives me nuts.
absolutely.
Drives me nuts. I don't know if you've seen this film. I'll say this because I grew up in North Jersey in the 1980s and 90s. Not the most woke place in the world. Not the most woke place. Went to a state school. Had to learn certain, like I think many people. You grow up, you say certain things. You grow up where every guy is like saying the word fag as if that means like dummy, and then you get older and you're like, oh, that's mortifying and shameful. I gotta drop that. Like I think that's a shift that thank God happened in culture. I grew up around. I wonder if you saw in college. And this is not about the trans community necessarily, but it's about gender identification. I saw the film Paris is Burning when I was in a college class, and I found it to be one of the most eye-opening things because it was like, oh, these are just people who are just looking for a family and looking for a sense of stability, who live a lifestyle different than mine, and it's a beautiful lifestyle. That any wariness or any trepidations are on me. People just trying to live. Let people try to live. Let people live. And maybe you can let your guard down, learn something, and enjoy it in some way. I don't know. That, again, not 100% of the experience we're speaking of today, but I found it to be one of the most, and it's a legendary documentary, but a lot of it is about people who, have some self-determination with their gender, and I found it to be super cool. And I always think of that experience when I was 19 and I was like, oh, I need to pull my fucking head out of my North Jersey upbringing and remember that there's all kinds of stuff out there that I might not experience if I don't seek out the experience and seek out understanding of it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but absolutely.
It's pretty rad. Willie Ninja invented voguing, later choreographed for Madonna, and it's the best. It's about, in Harlem, there's balls, like, I believe in the film they call them drag balls. I know that's another phrase that's very problematic, because it gets applied to everything. Well, I mean,
it like the drag community is fine, it just has nothing to do with the trans community.
Yeah, everybody lumps, so, like, anything that involves any sense of shifting from the very traditional gender identification gets labeled as drag, and I know that that's a very problematic thing. With my TV show, we once did an episode trying to support non-binary gender stuff, and we used a lot of phrasing that was wrong in that. I always felt like a real dope for that. And drag was one of the words that came up where my sweet friend Mal stepped in and was like, hey, dummy, you had good intentions there, but you might be doing more harm than good. You should edit that word out. It was much appreciated, the advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think because there are so many different, like, identities or that fall under the LGBTQ more letters, because it's now like such a, it's like we've sort of pushed everyone who's not heterosexual, not cisgendered, into this big category that really should be broken up a lot more. People tend to have trouble separating them. So, like, for example, sexuality and gender have nothing to do with each other. There are gay trans people, there are straight trans people, there are pansexual, bisexual, asexual trans people. The two are not related at all.
Yeah.
But I think people tend to have trouble with that distinction.
Right. I think so, and there's all sorts of things to learn, and if you're not experienced, it could be initially confusing. But yeah, there are people who might be born and considered female who transgendered to being male, and then would like to live date other men, and some people might be tempted to say, isn't it just, if you like dudes, isn't it just easy to stay a girl? And it's like that's not what it's about. It's just not what it's about to that person. And if you don't understand it, recognize that it was probably a rockier road for that person to have to explain that and live it and process it growing up than it is for you to understand it now. And that,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I identified as a gay man for most of my life until my girlfriend or my fiance started transitioning, and that doesn't have any impact on my like love or attraction for her. Really,
Wow.
I'm more attracted to her the more feminine she gets because she's happier and more herself. But like I didn't transition so that I could sleep with girls without being a lesbian. That's one of the more ridiculous accusations that the trans men do get leveled at them.
Right, because it's so much easier to be a trans man than both of those communities have it so easy. But that's amazing. So wait, you were dating your fiance before your fiance had decided to transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for a number of years.
Wow.
Actually, I met her sort of right before I started transitioning.
Wow.
And it was like her, because I came out as trans in high school, but then kind of like went back into the closet for a long time because I didn't feel like, even though I knew I was trans, I felt really like trapped. And this is related to depression and anxiety, but I didn't feel like, even though I 100% supported other trans people going through their transition, I didn't feel like I could do it, or I didn't feel like it would work for me, or that anybody would ever like believe that I was actually a man.
Right.
So I met her like sort of right when I was kind of saying like, actually, I need to do this because maybe it won't work, but if I don't do it, I'm going to die because I can't do this anymore.
Right.
And she really, supported me and like told me like, absolutely, I'll use male pronouns for you. Absolutely, I'll use, your real name. Like, you can do this. And sort of, and because she has also always struggled with gender stuff and was really drawn to androgyny and like trans people, but hadn't quite like put her finger on the reason for that she was also trans. So I think sort of helping me through my transition and supporting me, she was able more to come to terms with, or that it was more revealed to her like, oh, I'm actually a woman and I should transition too, and I want to transition too. So we helped and supported each other a ton.
That's
in
amazing.
That way. But
so you two have dated each other and supported each other as at a starting point that has shifted, and you've almost like passed each other on your way from one end of a spectrum to the other. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, she calls us swappers.
Swappers. Is that just a personal nickname for your relationship, or is that
I mean,
is that a phrase
it's
at large?
It's the term she's made up for like to like a trans man and a trans woman who date, essentially.
Swappers. That's cool. We have 30 seconds left. I feel like I could talk to you for 3 hours, but the bell's about to ring, and I thank you. I hope I haven't rambled too much. It's been really cool to talk to you.
Oh, not at all. I hope this wasn't a boring conversation because I know it was very information-y and not too personal, so I'm sorry about that. But I'm very happy that, you reached out to me and we were able to talk about it.
No apologies. Cool. It's cool. It's cool. And thanks for letting me be a dope.
Oh, no problem. Bye, Giraffe.
Caller, thank you. And like I said, I could talk to you for a long time because you are so open and sharing so much, and there's so many stories that could have been told in this episode, and I'm so glad that yours were the ones that were, and I hope other people call up their versions of this story, whatever it is. And again, I think it's so amazing, right? I bet there are a lot of people who are going, wow, I thought that was going to be really crazy and eye-opening, and at the end of the day, all that person said was like, I'm just living, and I feel pretty good about it now. Didn't feel good about it necessarily in the past. Stop asking me about my genitals. That's like really all it was. That's all these lives are. That's all this person's life was. So many people just want to be happy, and I'm happy that I got to have that conversation. So caller, thank you for calling. Thank you so much to so many people who make this show happen. Jared O'Connell in the booth, helping out, getting the gears of the show, the engine of the show. I don't know how to turn any of this equipment on. Jared makes the whole show happen. The Reverend John DeLore and Greta Cohn, who helped build this show in the early days. Shellshag, the intro music. Shellshag's the best. Support them. They're on the road all the time. Want to know more about what I'm up to? You go to chrisgethard.com. All my tour dates are out there, and I'm telling you, I'm going to try to make a beautiful anonymous tour happen the end of the year. Everybody's already tired of hearing me talk about that one around here at Earwolf, all the questions I got. If you like Beautiful Anonymous, please do rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. It really helps get word out there a lot for us to move up those charts. So make it happen, and we'll see you next time with more Beautiful Anonymous.
Kiss me face to face.
Thanks to Bombas for sponsoring today's show. Bombas offers premium, thoughtfully crafted socks, which customers overwhelmingly claim are the most comfortable socks they've ever worn. And best of all, for every pair of socks Bombas sells, they donate a pair to those in need. Very cool. They've donated over 2 million pairs so far. These are my wife's favorite socks of all time. This is not a thing I'm making up or that I'm being paid to say. That's just the truth. She loves them. See what a big difference this little article of clothing can make. Go to bombas.com/stories to get 20% off your first order. That's BOMBAS.com/stories. You'll love your Bombas socks or your money back, guaranteed. Next time on Beautiful Anonymous, a guy who did all of the drugs tells us what life is like now. So you blaze trails on a mountain that you regard as your mountain. That's the only thing I know about you thus far.
Well, like I said, child of the 70s, we were trying to grasp what was left of the 60s of free love and drugs, and we missed it. If the people in the 60s shared a joint in a group, then we had to take it to the extremes and do every drug known to man, trying to accomplish what went down in the 60s. Major fail.
That's next time on Beautiful Anonymous.
Hey everybody, this is W. Kamau Bell. You may know me from such podcasts as Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time, period. But I have another podcast with Hari Kondabolu called Politically Reactive. We're starting up our second season on March 29th, and we're joining the Earwolf family. Subscribe now on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This has been an Earwolf production, executive produced by Scott Aukerman, Chris Bannon, and Colin Anderson. For more information and content, visit earwolf.com.